Hi, this is Gary Snow from Dieku Games. I'm doing something a little bit different than talking about the future of Dieku Games and my philosophies on role-playing games. I actually wanted to dip into a game that I really had found near and dear to my heart, which is the Car Wars game by Steve Jackson, or Steve Jackson Games. And for us, my gaming group as a teenager in the 80s, it was perfect because it didn't require a GM. So what would happen is our typical GM, Dave, the awesome DM that he was, he sometimes got tired of it, and we'd play different games. But eventually, we would decide to do a bit of a Car Wars tournament, and it was always a good reset and made you appreciate Dungeons and Dragons a little bit more. And I just wanted to review what I still had as far as my Car Wars collection and go through it a little bit. And so I've put together these books that I'll just quickly go through, and let me know if you've got your own collection or own memories of Car Wars. And I'm just going to go through it because some people that I've encountered actually don't really know that much about it. So I'm going to go through the Car Wars book and then review some of these other awesome books of Uncle Albert's and Auto Duel Quarterly. But I'll get to those in a little bit. So Car Wars, it really did start as like almost a micro game. So you have a lot of one-page games today, and this is probably very similar. What would happen is originally you would get these little plastic containers. If I can open them up, that was always a little bit of the dilemma. There we go, sorry. And within it, these would be here, but the glue has long since gone, and you would have a little micro game inside of it. Truck Stop, Sunday Drivers, and another one for Car Wars. But this is more of a saddle stitch book for the Car Wars game that I was going to review today. So Car Wars was set in the future, Mad Max kind of dystopian future where cars and auto dueling became like Running Man, and the society had broken down. So if you look at the chronological order, you know, I always get a kick out of these because you never know when they say, you know, in 2000 this happened, and etc. So if you go through there, basically there's Civil War, and because Steve Jackson Games was set in Texas, I think they do have a lot of points that they talk about with Texas and the South there. And then there's food riots in 2016, gangs ruling most of the U.S. And then they missed on COVID, I guess. But in 2020, many large cities are abandoned. National government regains authority. There's food rations, unemployment's at 37%. So anyways, you get the idea. It's a breakdown of society similar to Mad Max. And the current year that it's set in is 2036. Or actually 2040. And the American Auto Duel Association is the official network of all these people that want to fight each other in their cars. So it's now a blood sport, just like Running Man, and you get to participate in it. So the idea behind it is that there's arenas that you can fight in, or if you're doing a little bit more of an adventure style, you can do it out on the road, similar to Mad Max, and you get to basically put weapons on your car and fight each other, and there's mechanics involved on how to maneuver your car and how to gun and all sorts of things as far as driving. So the basics of it is you get a car sheet, and here's a sample of it. And then you get your movement chart, and there's 5 phases per round. And depending on how fast you're going, for an example, if you go to here on the 50-mile-an-hour chart, you get to move 1 inch per round. So if you can imagine, if I bring out a table, or a table, not a track. Sometimes these would be large arenas, gladiator things. And each one of these was one movement. So if you look at here, you could move 1 inch per movement, or a half, if that was what the half was. And then you would finally max out. So if you were going 100 miles an hour, you could actually move 2 squares. So it was a pretty simple format for how you would do it. And if you were having multiple vehicles on it, going at different speeds, on one round, if you were going 100 miles an hour, you could go 2 squares, whereas the ambulance would only be able to go 1 because they're only doing 50 miles an hour. So that's how you kind of get the idea of your speed. And on your character sheet, or basically your car sheet, because that was the most important thing, I think people were secondary to the actual vehicles, and it totally makes sense. And that was the fun of it, is that there was no kind of real accountability to your person. You were out there to just destroy the other vehicles, and it was kind of fun. You could get your frustrations out on your friends. And if you look at the sheet, your tires would have defensive points. You would have armor in the front, top, left, right, and under, and the bottom. So that would essentially be how your armor would be taking. And then you would also list your engine, your super plant. Your driver would have 3 defensive points, as they called it in Car Wars, not hit points. You'd have depending on what you buy for your weapons, in this case, you have a flamethrower on the left and a flamethrower on the right. A flamethrower shot twice, you mark it off. And on the tire, you have 9 hit points. You got a machine gun, or 2 machine guns on the front, and how many times they've shot. And then you got flamethrowers on the back, and they're linked. So that's essentially how you compared your vehicle to other people's vehicles. And you could do straight line movement, as I showed in the track example. And then there was maneuvers and speed changes, which could cause an accident or a skid, or whatever the case might be. But that is all determined how fast you're going and what kind of maneuvers you're taking, which I'll cover in a second. So there's a movement chart. And essentially, the movement chart was this key. So if I slide this out of the way just for a second, if you were to turn a maneuver like that, it was a die 3 challenge. So that would be the type of difficulty that you would have on making this kind of maneuver. So you could accelerate, and that was really determined how much of a power plant you had in your vehicle versus deceleration, which if you decelerated too fast, you could really crash or skid. The handling class was based upon the handling class of the vehicle, but it also helped if you had better suspension that you could add to your vehicle. It would also help if you had a driver skill, so that would improve your handling class on each round. And as well as there is a reflex roll, which is kind of more of a randomized to see if your reflexes were really good that turn, and it would change on the turns. And going back to the control table, you can see the speed along the left-hand side. And if you were on your controls, if you were all within this range, you were still safe. But if you started to get to the point where every time you added a harder maneuver, it would get worse and worse for you, because you could only recover at the rate of your driver skill and slowing down, etc. So on a 2D6, if you rolled over that, then you would have to roll on the crash table. And then if you were really bad and going super fast, basically you would just roll on the crash table anyways. And as I showed you in the turning key, there was different turns and different drifts, that if you were drifting, it would be a D3 moving in that direction. So I'll show better examples of that later. But up top, they kind of show it a little bit better, 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 45, 60. So each one of these tighter turns would actually potentially cause an accident. And if you're going faster, the more potential there was for an accident to happen. A little bit more explanations. There is the Bootlegger Reverse. Everybody wanted to do the Bootlegger Reverse. It was the maneuver where you basically spin around so that you could face your enemies, and you'd have to have a certain amount of speed coming into it. But it was quite a risky maneuver for you to do that. There's the T-stop, pivots, deceleration. So a lot of different maneuvers, and they would kind of show you on the grid how your vehicle would move. And of course, if you were outside, there'd be different road conditions, or even some of the arenas actually, they're open. So if you wanted to have mud bogs, that kind of thing, it was all pretty fun stuff to figure out. Then there is other damage that you could incur through falling. Some times arenas had overpasses, and if you fell off of it, you could do damage to your car. And then ultimately, if you ever did crash, there was a crash table and you'd roll the 2d6 on it. And if you go back to this table, the modifier at the end would tell you the bonus to the crash table. So it would be +6, +9, and on a 2d6, +9 would be probably resulting in a bad result. And I mean, the crash table wasn't really well laid out. However, pretty simple, a 2 or less trivial skid, minor skid, ranging up to 15 or more. And let me just read this description because it's pretty good. The vehicle vaults into the air by the side or the front tires. The tires doing the vaulting take 3d of damage. The vehicle will then fly through the air for 1 to 6 inches, roll 1 die, and in the direction that the vehicle was traveling before the crash resulted, revolving 2 sides for every inch traveled. When it lands, the side that takes hit collision damage at the vehicle's initial speed. If the attempted maneuver was a tight bend or a hard swerve, the vehicle will flip over and end over end. Upon landing, the vehicle will continue to roll as per result. 11 on this table. All occupants take 1 point of damage automatically. Body armor does not protect against this damage, so pretty severe. And I think 13 or 14, there's where the vehicle's on fire. So it's always fun to see your friends burning in wreckage. So anyways, like I said, sometimes you build up a lot of frustrations against your friends over time, and Car Wars was the way to kind of equalize that. You could get your frustrations out on them. There'd be collisions, head-on. The damage was based upon the weight. And there is a whole procedure for how that would happen. And for the most part, I think people really kind of, because there is no referee and the rules were fairly consistent. There'd be some times that you would not agree on something, but for the most part, it never really was a problem, and always a lot of good laughs of trying to kill each other. There's debris and rules for running over hazards, and as you can see here off to the side, here's some of the things that you could drop. There's chains, landmines, spike plate, a large one, smaller spike plate, and all sorts of debris that you could drop. And I'll cover some of those items that you can build your car with. There's off-road dueling, ditches and gullies, water. And so let's get on to the combat part of it. So there is a rate of fire, and you can only fire once per turn. And then there's other items that were automatic that you could just hit the button and they would just fire automatically. And you could shoot on from your right side, your left side, or your front or your rear. So depending upon where you mounted your items. And then there was the line of fire of how far you could see, and there is targeting. There's rules for targeting cycles, trikes, but ultimately the hit depended upon the weapon itself. So I'm going to pull up the weapon sheet, and here's some of the weapons that you could choose from. So let's choose a really good one here. How about the flamethrower? So to hit required 6 on a 2d6. And if it was the rocket launcher, it would require 8 to hit. And then the damage corresponding. And then, of course, each weapon had its own defensive point and cost weight, which we'll get into shortly. And then, if you had to buy magazines or refuel for the flamethrower, there was some cost involved to that. But as I mentioned, there's the spike gun, spike dropper, and I'll cover some of those weapons shortly. So there was different modifiers to hit. If you were point blank as well, it would change. And then there'd be damage. So there'd be, burst effects, area effects, and how you would record the damage. We kind of showed you the character sheet earlier on. Then you have your front armor, left armor, etc. And then ultimately there would always be, injury to drivers. At the end of the day, like really, most games kind of came out to a driver getting out of his burning car and jumping out with a handgun, and then you would actually hit the driver. So sometimes it was almost like a demolition derby at the end. The two people got out and fist fought or had a gun or something like that. So it was always kind of fun. And then there's rules for the dropped weapons, hand weapons, grenades, etc. Rules for buildings. So sometimes the arenas had buildings, and your players would run into the buildings or go up into the stands and whatever you could kind of think of. And here's a section, like I said, it was pretty small part of the game. I think it was the skills for the players, but some people actually really took to this and built their characters up in very kind of simple rule system for skills and fast talk. So if you were playing more of a road game like Mad Max, it would be far more of this stuff. But if you were doing a one-shot arena duel, you would have your driver skill and your gunning skill and that kind of thing. And then, the more you win, the more prestige you get, wealth, etc. And a list of hand weapons, same principle. You had to hit, you had the damage, number of shots, cost. Now, vehicle design. This is when the fun started, because you tried to make everybody equal. So you would say, okay, just like a gladiator game, everybody's on the same page. You get a budget, and everybody had to stay within their budget to build their vehicle. So you could choose between these types of body: subcompact, compact, midsize, sedan, luxury, the station wagon. And I don't think they have minivans. It's funny, I think this kind of came out before the minivan craze. So it's not in here. And then you could also buy armor and different types of armor. So there'd be fireproof, laser reflective and fireproof, metal. And each one cost a little bit different, and then depending upon the weapon that was going against you, it would have an advantage. You could also increase your chassis so that you could have more weight. So if you see on the different body type, there is a max load, and so you could increase that so that you could carry more armor and you could carry more weapons. And then suspension was, if you wanted to improve your handling class, your base handling class of the vehicle, you could improve it. But once again, that kind of came at the cost of the body. So if you wanted to have a off-road suspension, that's 500% of the body cost. So a van being $1,000, it would be $5,000 for the suspension. And then power plants, that was essentially your acceleration and also it had some defensive points, and which was very beneficial if shots ever got through your armor. You could actually take them off your power plant rather than take it off your body. But at that point, you're in a lot of trouble anyways. Then you could also get tires. Each one had a price. So you'd have the heavy duty, puncture resistant, all sorts of things. So if people drop spike plates and the puncture resistance, that was always really good to have. Fireproofing, you could double it. And then weapons. And so I showed you that weapon table, but I'm going to talk to you about Uncle Albert, which is probably the best part of the game, I think, was the Uncle Albert books. And so there is a formula for your acceleration. And then, of course, there's different types of cycles and trikes. And then the weapons. So I'm going to skip over the weapons because I'm going to talk about Uncle Albert's. But they had a list in the game itself of the different things you could get and accessories for your car. And defensive things like fire extinguisher and active suspension, ABS, surge lights, etc. And then they had some sample vehicles and some kind of quick scenarios if you wanted to kind of get going on that. So that was the main book of Car Wars. So I'm going to now flip over to Uncle Albert's. And so the year that this took place was 2040, and so you had the 2035 Uncle Albert's catalog, and then you also had the 2036 Uncle Albert's catalog, and I think there was a 2037. It's an orange one. I've been actually looking for that, and I saw it at the local shop here, and I should have bought it, and I never did, and now I can't find it, so I'll have to maybe one day look on eBay. But let's look through the 2035, the first catalog. So one of the funniest things about the Car Wars system was this kind of tongue-in-cheek of Uncle Albert had all these automotive killing items, and he had this really funny kind of tongue-in-cheek description of how you could kill your enemies. So here's the 2035 catalog, and it had the offense, so you could get a machine gun, all the stats that were on that other sheet, basically in here. Vulcan machine gun, auto cannon, recoilless rifle, anti-tank gun. So let's read the description here. When you want to make your presence known, Uncle Albert gives you the perfect calling card. Whether a dependable warhorse like our 50 caliber machine gun or a high-tech surprise package like our exclusive auto cannon, patent pending, your auto weaponry from Uncle Albert will let every opponent know you have the extra something. That marks the discriminating duelist. And don't forget, Uncle Albert carries the widest selection of ammunition and maintenance equipment available to the general public. When your ammo runs out, so does your luck. Don't let either happen. So, like I said, kind of fun, tongue-in-cheek. You got the tank gun, cluster bombs, grenade launcher. You had different lasers. Of course, you needed the laser battery to power it. You had rockets, medium, light, mini, the 6-shooter, the rocket platform, micro missile launcher. You had radar-guided missile systems. And so, as a kid, this was just fun. You got to go through the catalog, and you got to pick mine droppers, mine flingers, napalm mines, the Artful Dodger, which is would allow you to spray and ignite the oil, which was fun. The flaming oil jet, flamethrower, the heavy-duty flamethrower with the A-Team van style, ram plates. And then you need magazines for your ammunition. And then there is defense. There's ice droppers, spike droppers, fireproof armor, reflective armor, wheel guards, retractable wheel guards, cargo safe, smoke screen, tinted windows, no paint windshield, tear gas, roll cages, oil jets, paint sprays, oil guns, You could also get a sunroof. I remember a few times that people would have their passengers stand outside and shoot from the sunroof, the ejection seat, in case you got into real trouble. But often what would happen is you would go up, and then while you were parachuting down, you would be targeted. You could have car top carriers, targeting computers. Of course, you need your cool sound system, long distance radio, remote control guidance system, turrets. Turrets became a thing for my group. We ended up getting a whole bunch of mini buses and had turrets on each of them and had teams inside of them. And so it was fun. Spoilers to improve your handling class. External weapon pods if you ran out of space. Anti-theft systems. Bumper triggers. So at the end of the thing, when you eventually get down to it where you're out of ammo and you still have body armor left, you would, or a little bit of armor left, you would ram them, and then maybe you'd have a bumper trigger to really win at the end, but usually it ended up blowing up everybody. You would have fire extinguishers, active suspension, radar systems. What if the jettison joining? So if you were on a cycle with a side cart, let's read this description. Desperate men in desperate times do desperate things. When your sidecar takes damage and you're on the run, ditch that drag with our brand new jettison joinings. Give it a blow and a go, Joe. Warning, it's not recommended that you do this with the sidecar as carrying a passenger, as it may strain your friendship. So, just, like I said, tongue-in-cheek, very kind of fun. And then personal items that if you did do more outside of role-playing, body armor, laser rifle, personal flamethrower, backpacks, machine pistol, and the Uncle Albert story. I won't read it, but anyways, it really just kind of captures the spirit of the game. And so that was the 2035 catalog. And of course, he has the Uncle Albert's guarantee, ironclad guarantee. And then you have the 2036 catalog. You get your free gifts, your fuzzy dice. You got the Mind Flinger. And you can see Uncle Albert in his boxing gloves for offense. Gauze gun, flechette gun, vehicular shotgun, infrared laser, twin laser. I actually use the twin laser quite a bit. Bomb rack, cloud bomb. Here's some defense stuff. Chaff dispenser, the drop spike plate, as you can see here. The flame cloud ejector, radar proof armor, wheel hubs, munitions, anti-power plant rocket that would take, if you could hit it, you would take out your power plants or opponent's power plant, explosive types, tip spikes, miracle missiles, the smoking Jenny, the puff dragon, the fireball special. Obviously they had seen some fireworks advertising. Incendiary ammo. You could light your opponent's vehicle on fire if it punctured the armor. Tracer ammo to improve shot after shot. Grenades. The computer gunner. Single weapon computer. Extra driver control. Radar jammer. I mean, you got some pretty cool stuff in here. Like they did a really good job. I think the images and the tongue-in-cheek descriptions of it were really good. And of course, Uncle Albert's picture really sums it up. He looks like the used car salesman. So it's basically your Sears catalog of weapons to kill each other. And so you could go through and you would build your vehicle with all these different items. And this is where the math kind of came into it. where you would choose your body, your chassis, suspension, and your engine, and then from there you would start adding your weapons and the cost of them, with the ammo, the number of spaces that your vehicle had inside of it, and then the total weight, and then eventually you could only have so much depending upon the types of bodies that you would choose. And here's a list of the spaces that it would take, how many shots it had, the cost, magazine cost, and then eventually you would put it all on your character sheet. You would track each turn. You would track your handling class and your speed so that you could know if you needed to roll and go on the crash table, your armor, any extra notes that you had for all your weapons to hit, damage, ammo, and your overall handling class. So really, at the end of the day, it was more about the vehicle than it was the character. And it was just a really fun time. And that immersive Uncle Albert's books also included the Auto Duel Quarterly that came out. And these were always a lot of fun because it was kind of that immersive kind of writing of you actually feeling like you were one of the people fighting as an auto duelist, and had some kind of mix between the rule changes and kind of real history, like it's set in the future in Uncle Albert's catalogs. It had the history of Texas here and all that was happening there. At one point they developed it for the computer. A few extra Uncle Albert's items being thrown in each issue. Talked about the AADA World Championship. And look at these culprits. I wonder where they are now. Clive Henrick, Mike Montgomery, and Andrew Buttery. If you know them, make sure they see this video. So I always thought that was cool, is like, because there was no referee and it was like the rules were the rules, you could actually have tournaments of people fighting. So it was, like I said, one of those things that you don't have a referee, you just work it out as like a board game. And more Uncle Albert's, more kind of like fake interviews of the drivers, stories. You had, Steve Jackson Games makes GURPS, and eventually made Auto Duel. That was a more beefed up version of the skills and the rules, and based upon the GURPS, generic universal role playing system. And I did have that at one time, but seems to have gone missing. More stories, rule clarifications. There's looks like a car rodeo on this one. Different points. It talks about auto dealing in Houston and the facilities, and then the classifieds. And I can only assume these are real. So it's kind of like, people would post in here, hey, let's do Car Wars in Lewiston, Idaho, Lincoln, Nebraska, Missouri. I really wonder what this ad was supposed to mean, but Games on Call. I think people that grew up in the internet age and only know the internet age probably do not appreciate probably how hard it was to get people together to game, and so these classifieds really helped. And the different chapters that you could join. And then, of course, their little pitches for all their different materials, stories, comments back. So I don't know. I think Steve Jackson Games, not to be confused with the the English or the British Steve Jackson, who wrote some incredible stuff in his own right. But Steve Jackson Games, they were based out of Austin, Texas, and I still believe that they are. And they did the Munchkin role-playing games, obviously, GURPS. But Car Wars was kind of my entry into it, and it was a blast. I really enjoyed it. And what I would say is that if you have an opportunity to play Car Wars with some friends, it's a good time. And I think you get your frustrations out, like I said. And the Uncle Albert's books were really fun to read and just kind of added to the atmosphere of it all. So that's going to be it for this review. Let me know if you like this format. Lots of people are doing these types of things, and I hadn't seen one on Car Wars, so I thought I'd make one because it was so near and dear to my heart, and as a kid growing up. And if you have any comments, mention them below. And once again, Dieku Games, I'm working on a new role-playing game system that I'm hoping to put it out there for your guys' play testing and review. So don't forget to subscribe, visit Dieku Games on Instagram or Twitter, and feel free to visit our website, diekugames.com. So until next time, enjoy your auto dueling and have fun playing Car Wars. So stay safe, and I'll talk to you next time.